the Mascagni, you have to just turn into operatic, expressive angels and divas who have been in love and lived lives. You're all way too young for that, obviously. But you know, you can pretend. That's part of what classical music is. And a lot of music is, you're actually going into the minds of somebody totally different. You're 12 and you're trying to pretend like you're 45 or 80. So to use your very powerful imagination to transport yourselves into a totally different world, that is going to be your challenge.
The Intermezzo from Cavalleria Rusticana is performed while our heroine in the opera is alone in the town square, struggling with contrasting emotions of love and of despair. This requires a huge amount of passion in our playing, so we're going to use lots of bow and lots of vibrato. It's going to sound wonderful.
Okay, so one thing it's really important to remember is how many of you are coming together at one time. And because of that, the dynamic pianissimo or anything that's soft is even more important. Now, it's really, really tiring to play really soft. It's one of the hardest things that you have to do. But I want you just to imagine when you're playing really soft that your arm is actually floating, almost like it's above the instrument, like you're trying to kind of float it above the string. And if you imagine that and also keep the bow moving, a lot of the time, especially for the younger ones who have smaller bows, you think you're going to run out of bow all the time, but actually there's more than you think, and you have to use the whole thing, keep that sensation of it floating above the string, and just keep the motion all the time. Obviously, you know the things that you have to do to play soft, play closer to the fingerboard, obviously to use less pressure. You can also tilt the bow a little bit this way. But I would say, rather than go into too much detail in your mind trying to remember 20 different things that you have to do to play softly, use your ears as much as you can and just remember that sensation of floating the bow and keeping it constantly moving.
So at bars 20 to 23, there's a big second violin moment. So we can really listen to the solo and really support her and basically just play out as much as possible.
Part to watch out for is bar 20, when the basses, particularly to listen out for the first violin part, to make sure that your pizzicato is moving together and we stay together with them.
For the violins, I'm just going to tell you to make sure you really know your part, so you can be looking up from the music, because really important in this music is the ebb and flow and pulling backwards, and sometimes the tempo doesn't necessarily stay exactly the same. For example, at bar 43 with our pizzas, we need to be ready to slow with Nicola as she sings and soars how she wants to.
Some of the things we've been talking about is how to help you prepare this music, and we notice, the thing that we talk about is how to make the music speak, and that, I guess, is to do with ebb and flow. So it's like sometimes we move a little bit forward and sometimes we pull a bit back, and obviously there'll be a conductor to help you do all of that. But it might be worth saying a couple of things, like firstly, there's a solo part. So the solo part is the vocal part, and we're basically breathing, trying to breathe with Nicola, who's doing the vocal part. We talked a little bit about the idea of breathing being like gasping, so sometimes we pull in a breath a little faster so it gives a little bit more emotional content, and sometimes we really take some time. And in bar 14 and 16 there's a sort of repetition with a little bit more, so to give emotional content to the more, there's a feeling of gasping before, and it may be that we are even a bit early, but essentially it's just a feeling. Also things like taking a big breath with the solo line, Nicola's line in bar 18, 19, 20, just before 20, where it's like a big group breath. So it's a big breath that we take in together before we play together. All we're doing is breathing and flowing through the whole piece.
So one thing I'd also like to mention is just this kind of lightness in every possible regard, including our left hand. So like, for example, at the beginning, the violas have this beautiful F. And if we just have like the lightest fluttering sort of feeling all over our bodies would be amazing. And that also works for example, in bar 20, when we have a down bow and then an up. So if our up bow could just be really just light and no accents at all.